G'day legends. Today we're talking around why super shoes may not be the best race shoe for you, and I'm speaking with Jack Craigo. You might know him on Instagram as @Craigo. And if you want to get straight into it, because we're just yarning and yapping for the first 6 minutes, skip to around the 6 minute mark and you'll hear a very nuanced conversation, and I'm glad we can get it out there. Have a lovely week, legends. Welcome back to episode 119 of the Sports Medicine Project. Now, I'm pumped because we have one podiatrist and one training to be a podiatrist over the other side of Australia right now. But I'm pretty pumped to be talking footwear, talking biomechanics, you might call it a controversial topic, but hopefully we're going to add some nuance to it, a little bit more than a 7-second Instagram reel. But I want to welcome to the podcast, Jack Craigo. Thanks for coming on, mate.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Pretty exciting to be on chatting with a real podiatrist.
Whoa. Come on. What would you, I guess, you could say real qualified by APRA, but I was just saying to you off air, I kind of come across your podcast, and I feel like when I was at your level, like I probably shoe knowledge on the same level now. I feel like back when I was training, at an undergraduate level, I was way off. Like, tell me how you come into shoes. Like, what was the way that you've made the Instagram and now just learning more about shoes? What was the journey?
Yeah, I started running probably 5 years ago. I came from AFL footy, had a bit of a brain bleed, jumped sports into some non-contact stuff, cross country, year 10, 11, 12, coming down to boarding school. And I've always been a bit of a collector, like ever since a kid. So shoes for running kind of settled into that quite easily. And then just nerding out in that kind of space became very, very easy. Started the Instagram channel mostly out of frustration with the kind of misinformation or lack of qualifications that's often attached to a lot of content. And like that, we kind of chatted about like 7-second reels, no context, no solid information, no grounding to it. So I started making some just mainly shoe reviews and a few like topical discussions on Instagram. And that's progressed to the point now where I'm now working in running retail, but also in contact with brand reps and brands themselves, and have a lot of access to shoes and the tech and a bit of the design process as well, which is unreal. So much fun.
Yeah, and you're studying to be a podiatrist at the moment, is that right?
Yeah, so I'm in the second year of the med part of it over here in WA, and then I have 3 years of pod units waiting for me next year and beyond.
Should go. And whereabouts do you work retail?
So I work at Running Warehouse here in Osborne Park, which is one of 2 stores here in Perth.
Yeah. So you're around shoes all the time. You're going to be dreaming of shoes, like shoes during the day, reviews, running.
10 meters within a pair of shoes all day. That's crazy.
When there's like a diabetic, has to carry around their EpiPen or some lollies in case they have a hypo, you're like, oh my, I need shoes. I need some shoes near. I'm going to, it's a feedback to Jackie right now. Oh, that's cool. And tell me, what was your first pair of shoes? Do you remember? Like what your first serious pair of shoes that you thought about buying and bought?
Well, I think the first official pair of running shoes that I was like, I'm actually choosing this to do running in was the New Balance Varsity, one of the old stability options.
Wow.
Varsity Prism. That was not that great, but the first shoe that was wow was definitely the original Nova Blast, which wasn't actually that long ago, 2020. So that was the first one that kind of got me hooked into the tech and the foams and, lightweight, the drop and everything else like that.
Yeah, I've heard people and patients talk about going from that shoe, a bit like people talk about going to the first 4%, like just a whole new world of kind of technology and feel on foot. It's cool.
Yeah.
And you're running as well, because you're pretty quick. Tell me about what your distance is. And I mean, some of your PBs, which, first person, because we aren't really a running podcast per se, but I've never read someone's PBs out on the podcast before, other than my own, which the only one that really matters is, have you run sub 20 for park run? And of course I have, we both have. So that's the only thing that really matters. But 15:54 to 5K. And then for the marathon, 2:39, what's your distance? What do you enjoy and what's coming up?
Well, there's 2 different answers I can give. I'd say the PB that I worked the hardest for was probably the marathon, 2:39.
Yeah.
My distance is definitely the 800 meters. I rocked down to the track end of last year, or no, it might have even been the year before, and I managed to rip 157 off pretty much no specific training, which is always a bit of a stab in the guts when you put 9 months into training for a marathon, and it turns out you're physiologically more suited to an irrelevant race distance. So I'll probably say, in terms of performance level, probably 815, but in terms of what I actually spend most of my time doing, it'd be, the half marathon.
Yeah. And is there anything coming up this year?
Uh, I've got a few kind of smaller races, 10K, 12K. I think I've decided that I'm going to do a bit of track stuff end of this year and just see what I can do with the 800. I think I have the policy of just trying everything and then seeing what's best. Like I'd be pretty happy to do, if it turns out I'm a fast 400 runner, I'd be on the track every weekend. But now I'm just kind of cycling between doing some marathons, doing some 10Ks, and then track season during the summer here in Perth.
Yeah. And tell me, so going to give you a scenario, gun to your head, you've got to beat your PB. What marathon shoe are you choosing?
Oh, it'd probably be the Fast Star 3, the new Puma one, I reckon.
Yeah.
I feel like that works really well with my mechanics, loads up my quads a bit more, which has been a problem like at the end of some of my marathons, is cramping in the calves. So I feel like that one shifts the load up a little bit, which works really nicely. Either that or the Wave Rebellion Pro 3 from Mizuno. That was my PB shoe from last time. The new Fast Star 3, I just got a good feeling about it.
Yeah, and that there's been a bit of critique of those studies, but it is consistent with other footwear research that they've done as well, and we're going to talk about that. But it's a good segue into the topic, because I couldn't imagine a better person to chat about this with, because you share pretty amazing content, which I love, and we're going to be talking around at the moment why super shoes aren't the best race shoe for everyone. And we're going to lean on some of the research. We're going to lean on some of our experience, the people that we work with, myself in the clinic, yourself fitting race shoes. And it's a good example. And I'm pretty interested to know what it's like, and even what you get taught as well working in retail, because, depending on which study you read, the majority of people are getting their advice from the retailers, and we've got good research on that, or online, but most people are going in, especially when you're going to be spending a lot of money, most people are going into the retailer. So I'm interested to hear what your kind of fitting process is and what you've been taught, maybe what you've heard from other chains as well. But we need to agree to start this podcast, we need to agree on a definition of a super shoe. Well, what is preferred to in the research is advanced footwear technology, but that's way too much to say. So we're just going to call it super shoe for the purpose of the podcast. But interested in your definition, I'll go first. But for me, it's an aggressive rocker, geometry, high stack, the foam characteristics, plate, and weight, and a combination of all of them. And you'd be aware, of research where they've cut the carbon plate, doesn't seem to change performance, where they can change the foam characteristics. But the combination of all of them together seems to make the shoe super. What do you think?
I think that lines up pretty nicely. Like, I think a lot of people get caught up on what the plate is, whether it's carbon or how stiff it is. I think mainly the properties of the foam is the key for me with the rocker. And even then, like, there's so much variation in the rocker, the plate, how stiff it is, the foam and everything else. But it's that general vibe of increasing your performance, I suppose. You chuck it on, you feel good.
Yeah. And what do you see from like working in retail? Because shoes, like super shoes, are fun. People want to run in them. It's kind of almost like a reward or treat for people when, you've trained really hard. You see your friends or you see elite runners, running in these cool shoes. Everyone's talking about how they're super, they make you run faster. There's probably a bit of misinformation potentially around injury risk. But when someone comes in to see you for a race shoe or even for a shoe, are they asking you around super shoes? Are they saying, is this for me? Or are they specifically coming in when it's race time? Or is it more general?
I think it's a bit of both, really. There is definitely people who come in who are very set on buying a super shoe. That they want a race shoe, a carbon shoe, is the way they describe it. Is they want anything which has a carbon plate in it. So sometimes you can persuade them that they might be more benefited in a training model which has carbon in the name, so you can get away with that. But there is also a fair few people who are a bit more unsure. They're like, am I fast enough for this? They'll recite their PBs and then they'll ask whether this is the best option for them. And then there is also there's also people who are terrified of carbon plates and think that they don't deserve them or aren't fast enough for them just yet. So there is a pretty big range. I would say most people are sitting in that kind of middle zone of being open to trying them, but want to hear what we have to say. But there is, especially around race season, people are coming into store at the end of their training block. They're feeling really good. There is definitely still some very certain people who want the best of the best.
Yeah, yeah, and we wanted to be kind of really clear because it's the discussion around this, and I made a post about this a while ago where we don't want it to be, I guess, a form of information where it feels like we're trying to gatekeep, as we was kind of saying offline, that, unless you're an elite, unless you run fast, you are not allowed to wear super shoes. It's going to be horrible for you. Because one thing I don't see acknowledged a lot online, like we know running is really, really popular. It's becoming increasingly popular. Marathons selling out. And it's a great form of physical activity. I mean, a part of my PhD is trying to figure out if we can reduce running injury risk. Yes, for the elite runners and the recreational runner, but for people that want to lose weight and get healthy and just meet their physical activity guidelines, it uses a lot more energy than walking, which is great. Running is pretty easy. Get a pair of shoes, a pair of clothes, and you're good to go. And if someone would said to me, hey, I'm going to run 5 times a week for 30 minutes because I really want to put on these fun, bouncy shoes versus not doing any activity, I'm like, well, that's a pretty hard point to say, well, you shouldn't be doing that. Go out and buy some shoes that you don't enjoy. So we do really want to acknowledge that, but we're here to hopefully explain why we think there are some better options out there, and the why behind that. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the compromise is the pretty important part. Like, you still want options which are going to be fun enough to like introduce people to the sport. Like, really good spot to be a runner right now. Awesome technologies, awesome foams. But there is definitely something to be said for like longevity and whether they're actually going to have the best experience possible in those super shoes in the first place. Like, they could think that trying it on in store, or they could have been told that they're going to have the best time. But ultimately, if it's about them spending more time in the shoes, more time running, having a good time, then pushing them towards a good compromise or some other options is obviously going to be quite important as well.
Yeah, and we'll speak to kind of fit and function and the why, but if we kind of focus just on fit, and if we're talking about the half marathon or even the marathon, I think and correct me if I'm wrong, I think the average finish time for a marathon is like 4 hours. Is it like 3:45 to 4 hours, or maybe a bit longer, like the standard?
It might be a bit longer. Yeah, it's somewhere around that zone.
Yeah, so if you're thinking you're someone who is going to be out there for 3.5, 4.5, and let's say to 5 hours, the shoes to be lighter weight are naturally going to be a whole lot narrower, and the material that surrounds your foot is generally a whole lot lighter. And those combination of characteristics mean that if you're going to be in a shoe for a long time, you're probably going to get a little bit of extra swelling and to take up a little bit more room in the shoe. Spending 4.5 hours in a shoe that's already pretty tight around your foot when you start the race, it's just going to be a lot more likely to feel uncomfortable. You might get some neurological symptoms because the nerves on top of your foot that sit really superficial, the upper of the shoe can rub on those. You might kind of feel like you're expanding out the side, and you don't want to be uncomfortable or changing how you're moving, changing how you're running, because these performance shoes don't come in, or except for the RC Elite 4, they don't really come in a very wide fit, so they're naturally very narrow. So you're probably more likely to be uncomfortable and you just not enjoy after 4 hours of running.
Yeah, completely. That's definitely one of the key things that we hear a lot in stores. Do you have a wide width in this shoe? Is there anything which is more accommodating in the toe box? So yeah, upper discomfort is going to be pretty key to a lot of people's experience, especially further back when you're spending more time in it. Like, if you're in the shoe for 2 hours and 40 minutes, I think there's a pretty big difference in terms of the shoe that I would choose for a 2.5 hour long run and spending 4 hours on feet as well.
Yeah, and the toe box naturally will taper off into more of a point again to save weight and change a bit of the geometry, and your foot is going to expand. Or even if you're going into the shoe naturally, you're probably going to have a little bit of tightness around there. And you think it's a tough position to be in for 4.5 hours.
Yeah, and especially like moving at pace, they're definitely set up to be more locked in, more secure. The uppers don't have as much stretch to them either because they're trying to keep you centered on the platform, which in some ways is going to be good, like in terms of stability and holding that structure through the heel counter. But in terms of, I guess, moving with your foot and accommodating it, it's not going to have as much give or flexibility for a variety of foot sizes.
Yeah, and you don't get the you don't really get the exact representation of how the shoe is going to feel. Like if you're buying a super shoe and you're going for, let's say, an hour run, maybe it's a Sunday long run, you're going for an hour run, and then you're going out for an hour, at marathon pace. That is not the representation of how it's going to feel at 3.5 to 4.5 to 5 hours. And it's really hard to be able to gauge that. Whereas someone else, as you said, who's running maybe a little bit quicker, they might be able to get a closer representation. And my experience has been, for myself personally, and also with patients, but the Alpha Fly 2, which I ran my very first marathon in Queenstown. And I got a blister at 90 minutes, and through my own fault, I was new to running. I hadn't spent 90 minutes in the shoe, and I got this kind of distal MLA blister, which I know it was quite a common place for people to get them. But speaking around blisters, again, as you're going to run, you're going to sweat, some fluid's going to build up, the shearing forces can rub on the skin. Even blisters as another factor to add in around that fit. You're far better off just having a little bit more room, still feeling secure, but having a little bit more room rather than the upper rumming around. What's your experience been with people reporting blisters in super shoes? Have you had that in the retail world?
Yeah, definitely arch blisters has been a big thing, especially with the often such a squeeze in the midfoot, especially on the medial side. Coming in, the upper is often kind of cupping underneath the foot, underneath your arch, and it's often, copping a little bit more force. So that has been a pretty big, pretty common report from a lot of people, like Metaspeed Skies and the Alpha Fly. The Alpha Fly was notorious for it. Especially, in the arch, a lot of pressure, some really nasty blisters from a few people.
Yeah, and if you're kind of looking at the shoe from the back to the front, it's almost, well, they call it kind of concave, and it will go in to the MLA, or you can have convex and go the other way. But as you said, it coming in through the arch, and it looks like, I haven't actually ran in it, but I'd be interested to hear your experience in the Fast R3, because that really looks like it really hugs the foot quite a bit. How does that feel? Like when you put that on, even for yourself, like, do you feel that upper around the foot?
I don't notice it as much in the arch, but it is definitely a very snug fit, which I think is purposeful because it's missing a fair bit of the midsole around that midfoot section. So I think they're compensating for the lack of the foam and the structure, which would usually be there, by pulling the upper in quite tight to hold your foot in place. It definitely hasn't been as present for myself as other people have been describing it, but it's definitely one of the more aggressive uppers.
Yeah, and then thinking, the upper for the midfoot and for the forefoot, even the posterior heel and the heel counter as well, in the Wave Rebellion 3, even just the geometry is so unique that I could feel some pressure on the back of my heel. Now, I haven't spent more than an hour running in that, but again, the material that it's made out of being a little bit firmer, but the reason for that is for it to be light. But I had the same experience in the Addy 3, the Addy Pro 3, where I would almost feel like I would go on to develop a blister just on my Achilles tendon. And I've heard some other people have that experience in I think maybe the first version of the On Cloud Strike, maybe, or something like that. But it's just another example. I don't know if you've had any shoes or people report that.
Yeah, so those three, the Adios Pro 3 and also the 4, the Wave Rebellion Pro, the Cloudboom Strike.
Yes, that's it.
The Elite as well. Yep. Something about the firmness of the material and the fact that they're so stripped down, no padding. And then also, I think the compression of the foam as well. We were discussing in the office at work, when you have so much foam on the foot, which is compressing, it kind of allows your foot to slip up and down against that heel counter just that little bit more, which isn't such an issue in daily trainers or super trainers, which have rounded heel counters, a bit of memory foam back there. So that has been also a big problem with some of the racing shoes, slowly being fixed by a couple of brands, but early days, early models, that has been a common complaint.
Yeah, and it's just hard to know. I mean, you spend an hour in it compared to 4 hours, and blisters suck. They are painful, and even trying to manage them and put coverings and things over them, they're a real pain in the ass, pain in the foot, really.
Especially on the Achilles, like I've had some real problems with the Cloudboom Strike, like it flaring up into almost like a bit of a tendinopathy, almost.
Yeah.
Like it assists to train in them. So it is to the point of like riding shoes off if you can't sort it out.
Yeah, my partner, there's a couple of brands that she just flat out can't run it, and she's had a flare up of her Achilles, so it's just a peritendon, like the sheath around it, and the subcutaneous bursa, which is a bursa on the outside of the Achilles, and we did absolutely everything. We padded, we channel padded, we put a little silicone heel sleeve on, we put some blister pads. I even scalpeled out some of the back part of the shoe, and it just didn't work. Just the way it kind of sat, like the shoe sat around her calcanea. So she kind of just can't run in them. And I would just hate to think, you're halfway into a marathon and that happen and flare up would be so painful.
Yeah, that's been the resort that I've gone to on a few of these shoes. I don't know whether you can see here
Yeah, yeah.
my Rebellion Pro. I've got the scissors in and snipped out a little bit of the foam, and even in the Cloudboom Strike, I got the scissors and went with two downwards cuts, probably 2 or 3 centimeters down, just to let the heel counter flex backwards a bit. Yeah, and that has solved the problem. But again, for $380 to have to do those kind of operations, it's a little bit scary.
Surgery to the shoe, yeah. And then comparing that to like the Neo Vista, which is like the polar opposite end, like that nice stretchy upper and how that feels on the back, or even the new Nimbus as well, like it's nice and padded on the back as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one to the upper, second, and this is probably the big one. And if you ever watch the end of any marathon, naturally as people fatigue, they're going to get some change in their biomechanics. And funnily enough, I tried to have a look within the research, and there's a little bit of research around really small a really small group of cohort of participants, but recreational runners may be more likely to experience some of those kinematic changes, kinematic being movement you can see, but mostly people don't change too much. However, when you see at the end of a marathon, you see some of the positions that people's feet are getting in relation to their leg. Now, I'm not saying it looks wrong or it looks bad, but it's got to be quite unique, or more so just different to what they're usually getting into positional wise. And what we know with soft tissues and injury, usually it's a chain or doing something that you haven't done. And if your foot's, pronating an extra 9 degrees compared to what usually does at the end of a marathon when you're fatigued, potentially that could contribute to injury risk, or maybe just the comfort. But what we wanted to speak now around is kind of the surface area of the midsole. And we said that the geometry of the shoe, how much surface area and contact you have and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but for weight and to make the shoe a bit more aggressive with the rocker, they will naturally cut away more from the plantar midsole and kind of do a cutaway in through the midfoot to make it weigh less. And then naturally that just gives you less surface area contact, which is always going to make it more unstable. Is that your understanding of why they do that?
Yeah, also possibly to almost focus a bit of the compression, because oftentimes now they can have the cutout in the center channel, and then have the two kind of like pillars of foam either side. So I think oftentimes it can also be so that the compression of the foam is more focused rather than distributing out like in a super blast, so you can get a little bit deeper into the foam, get a bit more compression, and a bit more, I guess, rebound as well.
Yeah, yeah, and there are some great studies. I mean, Moller et al, Grololini et al, and Benno Nig's got a good systematic review as well, where they look at and Malik's et al as well. I always pronounce his name wrong, but they've done some really interesting studies where they basically just take a shoe at a certain stack height, like 30 mil, and they increase it by 5 mil increments and just see how much frontal plane movement do we see in the foot and the ankle, which is kind of how much you're rolling in, how much change do we see at the knee, and how much change do we see up at the hip. And there does seem to be a dose-dependent relationship with the more you increase it, the more you're going to see increased movement. And what we're kind of saying is, if we're thinking at the end of a marathon when you are fatigued, what we want to try and do is reduce some of that movement potentially, so it's not as fatiguing. Because if you're, I don't like use the P word, but it is a context in this place. But if you are pronating, let's say through mid stance, and we're looking at the excursion, let's say it's 15 degrees. Theoretically, if you can reduce that to maybe 10 or 8, maybe the tib post, the Achilles tendon doesn't have to work as hard to be able to move you forward. So what do you think of that? Anything you'd add to kind of or how you would explain what's happening at the end of the marathon for those shoes?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is down to the surface area, the geometry as well. But I think you could also speak to the properties of the foams, the like higher rebound, but also very compliant foams often will degrade a little bit over the course, or sometimes a lot over the course of a marathon. They're going to warm up, they're going to compress down, become softer. And I think that can also contribute to more exaggerated mechanics in those shoes, especially if you're already kind of collapsing or moving very in an exaggerated fashion on top of it, compared to like a standard daily trainer foam, which is a little bit more resilient, a little bit more structured, and with some of the like stabilizing elements like the plates and stuff like that, that can definitely hold its structure a bit longer. Whereas I do feel like racing shoes, especially the really high performing ones, which are more compressive, do tend to degrade or kind of change their own components as well after 3, 4, 5 hours on foot.
Yeah, so you're higher up, you're on a narrower base, so you just have less contact with the ground, so you're going to be more unstable anyway. And that's like if you put on one of these performance shoes and you try and balance compared to your daily trainer, and then and on top of that, the fatigability of the foam as well, like say PVA compared to EVA, and you're not going to be out there, as we said, for 2.5 hours. If you're going to be out there for 4, 4.5, and 5, I mean, I don't even know how many steps. What, 20, 30,000 steps, do you think? I mean, that's a loading cycle. I'll say half of that, 15,000 loading cycles for the shoe. It's quite a lot to go through there. So those characteristics put together, what we're saying is it could potentially be not a recipe for injury, but you might enjoy the experience a little bit more in a safer shoe. And we're going to kind of speak to the features and the shoes as an example that would hold that. But when someone comes in to see you as a, let's say a recreational runner with a 4 or 4.5 hour marathon goal, how are you, I guess, communicating that and explaining that in the shop?
I think a lot of the time I will just say like a bit of a heads up here, like this is how the shoes feel now, but with these new technologies, with the compressive foams, it's not always going to be as consistent as, it's going to feel the same across the entire race. I'll obviously be communicating about what kind of race they're going for, what kind of time they're aiming to spend on feet. And then we'll base a little out also how like other factors like how much they weigh or, how tall they are, how much force they're going to be putting through the shoe. And then we'll often chat about like, do you want a shoe which is going to have your back at the end of the race, or do you want something which is going to be a little bit more aggressive, is going to have, a bit more pace to push along? But oftentimes, if they're a little bit further back for 5 hours, I'll definitely be recommending more comfortable, more structured shoes, I would say. So it is definitely more based around the times that they're hoping to run and just letting them know that the foams are going to change as the race goes on.
Yeah, and you mentioned their weight as well, and we know very clearly from the research the biggest risk factor for any injury is having a previous injury. But you could certainly debate one of the other top three is BMI is a really clear risk factor for developing a running related injury, and it does change where the shoe might be the same variable, but someone that weighs 100 kilos in a size 12, they also could have a size 9 or a size 8 in 3 different people. And if you're adding more weight, like I'm 100 kilos myself, and a colleague of mine, he's a size 13. I think he's like 65 kilos, and we might, let's just say, relatively got the same shoe. It's a whole lot more force from me going in through that shoe, and I might be out there for double the time. So they are important characteristics, and this is why retailer is important, but also considering some other shoes that are just going to hold their weight and their durability a little bit longer. What do you think, footwear-wise, is a shoe that you find works well for a lot of people, fit and also for the marathon? What are some shoes that you're thinking?
In terms of the more accommodating ones, I think it would be pretty hard not to mention the Superblast 2. Nice wide base, resilient foam, fairly stiff, quite structured. It does soften up a little bit, but even after 3, 4 hours on foot, it does still have that overwhelmingly stiff directed ride. The Neo Vista 2, I know we're both a fan of that. Roller. Potentially a little bit more compressive than the Super Blast. But I do think that the plastic plate does a pretty good job of distributing out that compression underneath quite nicely, and you do get a bit of guidance from the channel underfoot. I find it works well.
Yeah. How do you on the Vista? I wanted to ask you how you found the upper, because I reckon I wonder how that would feel, because I haven't run 4 hours in it, but I wonder how that would feel. Great shoe, great feel, and a great similar to the Super Blaster shoe that does everything, but certainly not as the upper doesn't feel as stable as what the Super Blast does.
It's not really an issue for myself, but we have had that feedback that this shoe would benefit a lot from a more traditional heel counter, a detached tongue, something that just really lets you lock it down just that little bit better. I guess it is a trade-off between a more accommodating, stretchy fit. Like that is one of the benefits here, is that a wider foot can squeeze into this
for sure,
and still feel comfortable, and there's not as many seams or overlays or anything else that might cause blisters. But yeah, in terms of the structure through the heel counter, it definitely doesn't have as much as some people are definitely wanting or could benefit from for a shoe, which is so nice underfoot.
Yeah, and if you just like, as you're saying with the shoe, another one I want to recommend is the Glycerin Max, which I've liked. I mean, it is pretty high up, but you have a look through the base of that, and if you're listening to this, when you're thinking stability wise within the shoe and having a look at the geometry, if you just look to the middle of the shoe, then to the front and the back, you're looking at how wide it is through the middle, and it's really quite narrow and cut out. Be great for weight, but the more surface area contact you have, the better it's going to feel. And I'd probably put I guess there's probably somewhere in the middle. I think the quote unquote safest maybe performance shoe out there would probably be the RC4. What do you think as a pick?
I would probably put in the Endorphin Pro 4 from Crago instead. Yep. I would say foam's a little bit more resilient. The beaded peeler just seems to hold a little bit nicer. It is a bit more stiff and aggressive, like maybe not as comfortable underfoot, but in terms of like stability and holding its shape, and it's got quite a straight last as well, very straight last actually.
Yeah, that's good.
SC Elite is definitely popular in terms of the softness. The only thing that does concern me a little bit is it has quite a deep kind of chasm underneath all the way through to the plate in the heel section, which I have seen a few people kind of collapse down into quite strongly. So people who are lighter on their feet, I definitely think the SC Elite has been when someone tries it on, it looks about right, in terms of how it's compressing and how it's moving. But putting a bit more force through the back, that is definitely something to watch for, I would say, collapsing those two pillars of foam, and especially when they can compress independently as well.
Yeah. And those shoes that we mentioned, I'd certainly say they're still pretty fun to run in. Like they still have some characteristics like the Super Blast, of some of the other performance ranges from ASIC. And the technology has come a real long way. So I guess it's not like running in your typical daily trainer. It's somewhere in the middle, but the trade-off of probably losing a little bit of the quote unquote performance bouncy feeling is you certainly do have, in theory, a safer shoe for the reasons we mentioned. And the other one I wanted to mention from a risk factor point of view as well, for maybe the running nerds out there, one of the other reasons why in some of these performance shoes may not be quote unquote as safe is when you are in them, you can have, generally speaking, and this is based off 2 studies, you can have a lower cadence, so you can just step out further in front, and that is going to have a higher magnitude of force, and we see that with other kind of other running related injury research. But you also have a higher duty factor, and the way to think of that is just basically ground contact with the time. So if you're spending more time in contact with the ground, potentially a bit more joint range of motion, potentially a little bit more tissue stress compared to being in the air, and that could also be a risk factor. And there is one good systematic review, I can't remember his name, that looked at that, and it was a longer duty factor and BMI as risk factors for running related injury in like 800 and something people. So there's some other things that we see when you put on the shoe that you might change how you move, and some of those factors may be potentially involved. But even for yourself, like going around even the shoes, and running around a corner or running downhill, at the end of a marathon, when you've got more underfoot with a wider surface area, it just feels better. Like you can feel like you can run a little bit quicker as well.
Yeah, definitely. Confidence factor plays in a big part, I would say, on a twisty race or slippery conditions. I think mentally there's definitely something to be said for feeling more secure underfoot.
Yeah. I'm not aware of any research specifically on like comfort, but I think comfort within the shoe is such an important factor over the course of the marathon. But I think with those characteristics in the shoes that you mentioned before, you just have to think it's going to be greater.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
definitely. If it's distracting you from your race or your pacing strategies or anything else like that, it's got to be worth at least a few seconds to go for something which is a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah. And what do you think for your advice? This would be great because you do some online stuff as well as working in retail. What do you think of people buying shoes online compared to trying them? Do you think some shoes like trainers you can buy online or some performance shoes you can buy online or you got to go in store? What do you reckon?
Yeah, I was thinking about making a video about this the other day because when I first started, I've been big into buying shoes online, which I think is just a Perth thing as well because we just don't get many shoes in store, in stock, colors or anything else like that. So
Yeah.
I've always bought shoes online. Sometimes I've suffered the consequences, but for the most part for myself, I think I have mechanics which match up with quite a few shoes. I don't often really hate models or have any real issues that stop me from enjoying shoes. So I've always thought online was fun, but then thinking about like a beginner going online and just trying to find the right information to get a shoe which is going to be appropriate, I think that my policy would be at least your first couple of shoes, it's probably a good idea to go into a reputable retailer, ideally a running specific retailer, to then try a few models on, work out what your preferences are. And then hopefully once you've had a few pairs of shoes, you can start to narrow down what your preferences are around softness and firmness and drop and foams and fits and everything else like that. And then you can make those educated, I guess, gambles on what shoes you want to buy online.
Mm.
Going straight from, your old pair of Asics, which you bought back in 2010 to one of these new age models is definitely quite a risky thing to do when there's so much variety now as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, and you don't know how your individual biomechanics are going to react and change within that shoe. Let's say you're using like the Nike Vaporfly as an example, or even like the Streak Fly, which is kind of
Mm.
marketed as a super lightweight, bouncy, fun shoe. Yeah, that's got a really narrow heel, and if you're like I strike on my heel, you really just don't know how that's going to feel. And sometimes, and I would probably maybe say more often than not, you get a good feel for the shoe. You try 3 or 4 on, you can see what feels the best, maybe what feels most bouncy, which is cool, but also what's comfortable. And then how do you feel stability wise? Because a narrower heel, you might hit that heel and feel like it compresses so much and it's just not comfortable to run in. Although it feels really bouncy, like there's no way I could run in this. And you just don't know until you're able to try that on.
Yeah, exactly. And when all the marketing is so similar as well these days, like it's all just screaming soft and light and bouncy, it's actually really hard to distinguish what the actual features are from, like if you're just looking on a shoe website itself. If you go on YouTube and start getting into the rabbit hole of reviews and comparisons and everything else like that, you might be able to narrow down something which sounds good or sounds appropriate or at least is quite popular and quite democratic. But yeah, at the end of the day, getting them on foot is going to be one of the most reliable ways that you can work out at least what's going to work reasonably well or should work.
Yeah, and even watching the reviews, like if you're watching it and you're listening to someone, like even just depending on how much they weigh, where they strike, and also their years of experience with running, like those factors are going to determine a whole lot more rather than 8 people saying, yeah, the shoe's really bouncy. Like their version of bouncy can be very, very different, and
Oh,
is
yeah.
often different to everyone else that's saying it's bouncy as well.
Yeah, there's such a huge variety in perceptions. It's so hard to even watching YouTube reviews, you could watch 10, 11, 12 videos and still not come across someone who has a similar set of factors to you, which would mean that you could potentially like the same shoe as them. So it is very, very tricky to base it off that information online, at least without having your own experience or like knowledge, I guess, around the shoes. Like once you've tried 5 or 6 different shoes and you start to really work out what worked in the past and you can kind of piece together the puzzle, I think you're definitely more likely. But yeah, definitely early days. I'd highly recommend getting into a retailer.
Yeah, it's hard when people. I get. I'm sure you do way more than me, but people message online and say, "Great, hey, either two scenarios. Either I have plantar fasciitis or I have pain. What's the best shoe? No context at all. It could be a stress fracture for all I know. Or the second one is, hey, what's the best shoe to run in? I'm like, well, you could speak for hours on end, but there's just no way that you can expect the shoe that I recommend to be the shoe for you, just, based off your foot type, your biomechanics, how you move, previous experiences, all that kind of stuff. I'm sure you get that on steroids. It'd be crazy.
Yeah, I get a lot of DMs, and most of the time I give 2 or 3 different recommendations, and I always say, go try them on in store, please. Like, if you get the opportunity to do, please go and give them a crack. Because yeah, there's only so much time that I can spend asking for context. How much running are you doing? Injury? Have you had any injuries? What have you run in the past that you enjoyed? Like, even then, it's still hard to really match it up to exactly how they're going to experience the shoe.
Yeah, you should just hit you should just set it up so there's an automatic reply. So when they say what's the best shoe, it's like, yep, Asic Kayano. What's the best marathon shoe? Asic Kayano. Just Brooks Beast or something like that. Yeah, that's good. So when people come to see you, you got a treadmill? Like, what are you doing for people to test the shoes to see how they feel?
Yeah, at both stores we have a Nordic track treadmill, which is really specky, maybe a little bit soft. We've kind of been chatting in store, so they have the option to run on that. But we also have quite a long store as well. So on quieter days, we encourage them, oftentimes instead of the treadmill, to go and run up and down the store, to actually feel what the shoe is like. I would say of the people that I see, it's about 50-50 between the people who are willing to go for a jog and then people who aren't. I would definitely say people who are more like recreational runners, people who are actually buying the shoe to go and run in specifically, they're definitely more willing to go for a jog in it. Like, everyday people are definitely more resistant to that. They're just pretty happy to stand up in that's the right one. But yeah, we always encourage them before, even if they've just come in for, I want the Endorphin Speed 5, I'll say, do you want to try it on? Have a run around, see what you actually reckon, before they just leave with the shoe straight away.
Yeah. How often are people telling you when they put on a shoe that it feels unstable? Do you get that very often in these performance shoes?
I'd say it's most often when people are coming from the kind of what we'd call like old school shoes to the new age models, like coming from a Kayano 25 and jumping into a Kayano 30 or 32. Well, I guess that's not a really good example because that is quite a stable shoe. But if they're jumping into like a super shoe from their old Asics, that is pretty common, depending on the shoe. That I'm not going to be bringing them out a Wave Rebellion Pro 3 or the most ridiculous thing. So it's not as exaggerated as if they come in and ask specifically for a shoe and I just kind of nod along and let them try it on. But yeah, it is definitely a fairly common concern from a few people.
Yeah. And tell me, sizing and width. So we, my colleague and I we had COVID happen. We tried to get some, and we ended up collecting 30 participants, asking them their shoe size and then actually taking the measurements of their shoe. And a lot of people were wrong, either in width or length. And I think it might be the first time I've said it publicly on the podcast, but I'm embarrassed as a podiatrist who works with runners and sees lots of runners. I would not measure, I have a branding device in my clinic. I would not measure people's width and length very often. But now, any runner, standard, regardless of whatever they tell me, obviously if it's foot and ankle related, I am measuring their length and their width, because so many times I've realized I'm like, this is potentially just a shoe fit issue, or the shoe fit issue is exacerbating their symptoms, and they might be a full size, sometimes a size and a half, just too short, which is crazy. And it's been like this for years, and they're so shocked. So how often is that happening to you?
Oh, it's so often. It's actually scary how many people come in. I would say if I see 10 people, 4 of them have got shoes which are too small. And I'd say more often than not, it's women who have shoes which are much too tight. I don't know whether there's like a stigma around women having bigger feet, and so they don't want to believe that they have shoes which are a size. I've had people with 2 sizes too small.
Wow.
And the ends of their toes were brutalized. Like, they were really, really, they must have been in some serious discomfort, but they just got used to it. I don't know whether it's, I guess maybe when you're growing up, you're always somewhat growing out of your shoes. So people get quite used to that.
Yeah.
Close comfort. That kind of feels comfortable to them. Yeah. So it's very often, I would say a lot of the time, any friction I have with customers is trying to persuade them to wear a shoe which is the right size for them, or trying to compromise between a size and a half up or just going the half size.
Yeah, and there is some research on like arch deformation as you get older, and also spinal disc. So like people can naturally get a little bit shorter, women more likely, and their feet can get a little bit longer as their arch deforms. But I mean that's in older people. But you're right with the challenge of trying to show someone like I've got their foot on the device. I'm like, this is your foot size. You have pain related within your forefoot. You can see the number? Like, yeah, I don't know. Are you sure? I'm like, oh, the device isn't lying. I'm not trying to trick you. I'm trying to help you here. So I can only imagine what that's like in the retail space. They're like, no, I'll just go to size 10. I'm like, anything we try and do, and it's just like this uphill battle of, I'm not going to be able to help you if the shoe is too small anyway, you know?
Yeah, exactly the same. It's almost like you want to put a little bit of a wanted poster on the wall that if this person comes in complaining about their toenail busting through the front of the shoe, they're not getting a refund.
Oh, like, oh yeah, I've had people tell me like, oh, the guy or girl that sized me up, you know, they don't really know what they're doing. They said I'm a size bigger than what I am, and the size up, and the shoe feels way too big. And I'm like, yep, it fits. That's probably why it fits properly. And you're just not used to it. Like their nails are all black, and like shoe fit is a risk factor for developing toe deformity and a bunion. So I just I take that route sometimes as well. Like, you know, you can certainly cause or be more likely to cause some deformity within your toe. So let's just get a shoe that's at the right size.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll always talk about toenails through the top of the shoe, like the upper. That's my risk factor for the customers is you're going to burn through your shoes faster.
Yeah, they're like, oh, the bloody Asics are making their shoes really crappy. I bought them for years and had no trouble, and now I'm busting through the end. Like, maybe they're too small, but we'll talk about that later. Yeah. So anything to leave the lovely listeners with? I reckon we covered like the main things around, you know, fit and the surface area, being a little bit more unstable, fatigue as well towards the end of the marathon, and also still getting a fun experience out of a shoe with some other awesome options out there. And I think one thing I wanted to add, a really short one, the shoes like the Super Blast and the Vista and the Glycerin Max, they are good in the sense of, as well as using them for the marathon, you kind of can use them for everything. You could go for an easy 5K, you could do your marathon, you could maybe even do some sessions in them, whereas I wouldn't recommend people to go out, you know, running 5 or 10K easy or do most of their runs, you know, in a Vaporfly, a Wave Rebellion 3. So you probably just get a little bit more, have more options within the shoe as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many options out there which can fill a lot of different spots in your rotation, which is going to give you better value for money, especially if it's a bit of a risky purchase buying a super shoe, which could potentially be not as comfortable as some of the others. Like a few other options that I've got alongside me, Puma Max.
Oh
as
yeah,
well.
good option.
Construction to the Glycerin Max with a nice broad base, maybe a little bit of a snug upper, but certainly a broad base and a nice Puma blended foam. Or shoes like the Zoomfly 6 as well. With a bit more flexibility in the plate and again, a bit of surface area. There's so many options out there now, which
they're fun to run in. They are fun to run in. Like, it's a good experience.
Some of them are so nice that I would even consider, like if I was pacing a race or, you know, just trying to get through a race more comfortably, I would definitely consider using them instead. Because they are just, high performing, but also blend that comfort really nicely.
Yes, mate. And if people want to find you to watch the 7-second Instagram reels, where do they find you? No, I'm only kidding. You are the context from your reels, and I shared one the other day around, you know, you were just giving really simple training advice and comparing that to some other bigger major marathoners and influencers, just trying to share like the secret 1%, which we know very clearly that there isn't, but things around, you know, training, sleep, good nutrition. It's simple, it's easy. So I really enjoy your content, and it's crazy to think the level that you're at as a pod student, but just, it always speaks to this. And I was speaking to a colleague about this, like when it comes to influencers and health professionals and kind of who to trust. I mean, it's almost like this golden kind of triangle of one that they need to run, I think. It just seems to make it just a whole much better experience. Like they're trying shoes, they're running in shoes. They either work or help with runners in the patient context or in footwear retail. And they're also teaching and educating about them, because then you have to really think about what you say and when you say it, because otherwise people will just call you out. So you're kind of a bit self-critical, which is good, which is what you need to be able to share information. So I really appreciate the content that you put out. But for people to find you, where do they go?
Yeah, so on Instagram, I go by Jog on Crago. And it's also the same on YouTube as well for some longer reviews. But Instagram's probably the more common of the two.
Yep. And you're at, which running warehouse are you at?
I'm at the Osborne Park store here in Perth, working a weekend shift and during the week as well.
Yeah. Do you have you had someone come in requesting to see you? I mean, I know it's a retail, but do people come to see you?
I don't think anyone's requested to see me specifically, but I have heard people talking amongst themselves before they noticed that I'm there, that Jog on Crago recommended this shoe, or Jog on Crago said that this shoe was no good, which is,
wow, that's
I've
so funny.
And say, guys, we got to try this on first and work out whether you like this shoe.
That is so funny. You just walk in and go, yeah, I don't know about that guy. He's an idiot. I don't know why he said this shoe. That's really cool, mate. Thank you so much for coming on. All your YouTube and Instagram handles will be tagged below. But thanks again, mate, for giving the time.
Beautiful. Thank you.